And, of course, I was there at the Trump Tower when he reached out to Ben Carson and asked if he
Right.
would serve his country. And so it was an honor. My family has known the Carson family for quite some time. My father's also a doctor. So it was an honor to be able to go work for who I consider to be my second favorite person in Washington, D.C., which is Dr. Ben Carson. And so that's what I did. I went and worked at HUD. And then, of course, I was with him for 8 months in D.C. And when the opportunity presented itself to basically come back home and serve my community and the neighborhoods that I know best, I seized the moment.
Back in February, you went to Congress.
Yes.
And, to testify at the same time that Michael Cohen was testifying.
Well, I want to clarify.
Yeah.
I was never planning to testify. My mere presence was supposed to serve as a reminder to Michael Cohen that integrity and honesty still matter in this country. And he knows that I know the truth, and he knows that I know he wasn't telling it.
So, you were accused of being, the token person of
Yes.
color or
Yes.
something of this nature. What do you make of this?
Well, it's sad because clearly what that represents is, first of all, evidently calling out racism is the new racism, right? Because a lot of people thought that that was a racist comment for the congresswoman from Michigan to say. But that aside, I think the reason why I was so viciously attacked is because I don't represent what the expectation of a black female is supposed to be in terms of mindset and voting record. And also, I was there, God forbid, with my own opinion about a man who I've known for 10 years. And also, I've known Michael Cohen for 15, even longer. I was there based on my personal experience. I was never there to represent my entire race. I was there to represent one person who is the President of the United States of America, who I know just as well as Michael Cohen. So my question to the Congresswoman from Michigan was, how is it that you take the opinion and statements of a criminally convicted, self-confessed white male perjurer over that of a fellow minority female who rose up through the ranks of the Trump organization from assistant to vice president, then spoke at the Republican National Convention in front of 24 million people, and is now the highest ranking African-American female in the Trump administration. To me, that's much more racist than being called a token. The fact that she didn't think I had my own opinion about this man and what he was saying. Look, I think any one of us in this room could tell you it doesn't take 15 years to figure out somebody's a racist unless you're making that up. I think we all know folks in our families, our circles, our jobs who have said inappropriate things, and we know who they are pretty quickly. So for Michael Cohen to say that Trump is a racist, it's just not true. He wouldn't have worked for him as long as he did if he were. I would not have worked for him still if he were. Again, I don't need this job. I don't need the money. I'm here because I'm serving my country under a man who has served me very well. A lot of people don't know that, look, I'm the type of person who judges folks by their actions more so than their words. And the Trump family and the president have really stood by me on multiple occasions on a personal and professional level. They gave me an opportunity of a lifetime. They recognized my work when I did it. Again, going from literally a personal assistant to a vice president. They put me in charge of all of their philanthropy, determining which altruistic causes deserved attention. It was an honor to run Eric Trump's charity for 7 years of that time, where we gave almost $16 million to St. Jude Children's Research Hospital in Memphis, Tennessee. Things that you just don't read about in the paper. Right. I was just looking at a stat the other day. In 2014, the Eric Trump Foundation raised $2 million. We gave almost 90% of that to charity. In 2014, that same year, the Clinton Foundation raised $91 million and ended up giving only 5% to charity. Why is that not a headline? Those are the types of things that really get my goat, especially when you know how giving this family is. Again, you said it yourself, the president did not need to do this. I can tell you as a fact, his plane is nicer. As much as I respect Air Force One, some folks might argue that, I know Howard Stern has said it, Mar-a-Lago is nicer. This guy could have just sat back and flown around and done all the same things that he's basically doing now, but without the heartache and stress. But what really touched me so much, and sometimes I get emotional even just thinking about it, is his love for this country is really what drove him to give all that up. And to be a part of that is something that is the greatest honor of my life. So how do I not give it up? How does the secretary not give it up themselves when you see somebody so selfless? And it's particularly hard when you see and from a personal perspective the type of vitriol and hate mail and threats that they get on a daily basis. From the moment my boss came down the escalator, I've been called coon, Uncle Tom, house Negro, Shiboon, words that I had to actually look up because I've never heard them before.
Yeah.
I mean, and the tragedy of it all is it's primarily coming from folks of my own race. The tragedy of being a minority conservative is something that a lot of people don't really recognize. Not only do we have the daily hurdles of any minority, and of course the daily hurdles of any female, but you also have the additional albatross of being conservative, and that sometimes can be a detriment, and you've seen it firsthand by the way I was received at that hearing. If I had been a white female who happened to work for the Trump Organization for over 10 years and know both Michael Cohen and the president equally, they would never have questioned my presence there. They would have said, here's a girl who's standing here, and her mere presence symbolizes that somebody is here to push back. And I wasn't there to just push back against the racist narrative. I was there to push back against every single narrative that basically Michael Cohen was raising, because I knew when he was lying. Michael Cohen and I were inseparable. We went to lunch almost every day. I was in his office all the time. He was down on my floor constantly. We traveled together. We went to dinner together. I know his family. I know his wife. I know his kids. I talked to him even after his offices were raided, even after his home was raided. I talked to his daughter after that happened. It was extremely traumatic. I was close to them. When he started talking about some of the things during the testimony about not wanting to ever work for this administration, never wanting to have gone to the White House, I was texting folks, letting them know that those were just bold-faced lies, and that we had evidence of that. And I personally did as well. And so, my presence there was to really let Michael know, again, that truth and integrity matter, and that I am going to look you in the eyes as you lie to the American people, and I'm going to call you out on it and make sure that these congressmen call you out on it too.
So, you think in his case, he's just was afraid of the jail time. He wanted to minimize that.
Without a doubt. And also, I actually posted something in my Instagram, which later was confirmed by the media. But, they threatened to jail his family, his wife in particular.
Yes.
And I knew that because he had told me so. The media ignored my post and chose to believe, again, a self-convicted perjurer instead. But, when folks threaten you, you might be able to hold it together and kind of be tough. But when they start threatening your family or your in-laws, or
Makes
you
it all
know,
the more difficult.
it makes it all the more difficult. You know, Secretary Carson and President Trump signed the largest disaster bill in federal history for Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands, over $20 billion. We've delivered half of that money already. And, you know, one of the things that folks watching and reading the newspaper are clicking the clickbait headlines that are Puerto Rico, you know, not getting federal funding. What a lot of folks who click that bait don't realize is there's something called an action plan amendment that every disaster region must submit in order to get the funding that has been earmarked for them. So, for example, Texas submitted it. Florida submitted it. Puerto Rico has only submitted an action plan amendment for the amount of money we have given them. We cannot give them more than what they've submitted a plan for because, again, one of the things that we're learning is that there's a lot of money left over from Ike that Puerto Rico hasn't spent. Okay. We want to make sure that the money is going to the right places on the ground, that we don't see the kind of deception and fraud that happened with Hurricane Katrina. So by law, the territory of Puerto Rico has to fill this plan out. And if is that, you know, this administration has created an urban council that's now going to invest over $100 billion through opportunity zones into urban and rural communities. This administration has given maybe $40 million more to historically black colleges and universities than the Obama administration. This administration has also passed the single most progressive prison reform bill in the last 3 decades. And those aren't my words. Van Jones said that. To, you know, the typical things that folks bring up when they bring up racism and my boss. One of those is Charlottesville. You know, the argument that he said there are good people.
On both sides.
Right.
Find people on both sides.
Find people on both sides.
Right.
Even CNN, I think, did a recent report admitting that that phrase has been twisted over the years and sort of manifests into its own sort of fake news, shall I say. What he said was that the original procurers of that permit to protest were historians, some of them professors at UVA, who did not want the removal of Confederate statues, period. Not because they worshiped Confederate soldiers or thought that they were on the right side of history, but because they knew that, you know, those who erase history are doomed to repeat it, and these are just historic monuments and that need to be respected as such, that this world is getting too PC. So when he said that there were fine people, what he clearly meant, and he said it a million times, is that he meant the folks who had originated that protest. It wasn't until later that obviously these neo-Nazis came marching down with their tiki torches and ruined the entire affair. But, you know, and Trump has denounced those folks many, many times, repeatedly. So I like to make sure that folks understand that you need the entire context when you judge someone. You know, and again, I've had the benefit of having his entire context for 10 years. And look, racists just don't raise children like Ivanka, Dawn, Eric, Barron, and Tiffany. They just don't. They are some of the most giving, altruistic people I've ever met. Their spouses are the same way. You know, if Trump, their father, were racist, that would have shown its ugly head at some point, whether it be in a back room joke or some sort of slip up. And I've been with them nonstop for almost a decade now, and I've never heard anything like that come out